Imagine this for a second. It's the summer of 1944. The largest carrier versus carrier battle in all of history is about to go down, a true clash of titans that will shape the rest of the war in the Pacific. But what if I told you that this epic battle was basically won by the Americans before a single plane even left the deck?
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in the Philippine Sea. You've got the massive U.S. Fifth Fleet, and their main job is protecting the American invasion of the Mariana Islands. Steaming right towards them is the Japanese mobile fleet. They are gunning for one single, decisive battle they hope will turn the entire war around. They've got this grand, secret strategy, but there's just one little problem. The Americans already have a copy.
So you're probably asking, how on earth does something like that even happen? How does the U.S. Navy get its hands on Japan's most secret operational plan? Well, the story involves a typhoon, a plane crash, and a brave group of Filipino guerrillas. Honestly, it's the kind of thing you couldn't make up if you tried.
Okay, check this out. On the last day of March 1944, a plane is flying through a storm. On board is Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, and in his briefcase is the entire master strategy for Japan's decisive battle, a plan codenamed the Z Plan. The plane crashes. Filipino guerrillas find the wreckage, and, incredibly, they find the briefcase. Those documents get smuggled to the Americans, they're translated, and by June, every important U.S. commander, from Admiral Nimitz in Hawaii down to Admiral Spruance on the scene, knows exactly what the Japanese are about to do.
Now here's the thing. Even without that stolen plan, the odds were already massively stacked against the Japanese. The Americans had way more carriers and literally double the number of aircraft. But the real difference makers were pilot experience and technology. U.S. pilots were seasoned combat veterans. Japan, on the other hand, was scraping the bottom of the barrel, using inexperienced replacements after getting hammered earlier in the war. You add superior American radar and this crazy new secret weapon called the VT proximity fuse for their anti-aircraft shells, and you've got the recipe for a very, very one-sided fight.
So the battle kicks off on June 19th. The Japanese launch their planes first, and they're hoping to combine their carrier aircraft with land-based planes from Guam, just like the Z plan said they would. The Americans? Well, they knew this was coming. They were ready and waiting. And what happened next in the skies would go down in naval history.
And that one quote right there from a pilot on the USS Lexington, it just says it all. It perfectly captured the brutal, lopsided reality of the air war on that first day. And just like that, the battle got its famous and infamous nickname.
So, picture this. The U.S. fleet's radar sees the Japanese raids coming from over 100 miles away. This gives them a huge head start. They scramble hundreds of F6F Hellcat fighters and guide them into the perfect positions to intercept. For the Japanese pilots, it must have been an absolute nightmare. They were basically flying straight into a buzzsaw.
The first wave comes in. 68 Japanese aircraft. A pretty powerful punch, but they make a critical mistake. They spend about 10 minutes circling to get organized before starting their attack. That 10-minute delay, it proved to be fatal.
Bam! The Hellcats just tear into them. Within minutes, 41 of the 68 Japanese planes are blown out of the sky. The few that manage to break through don't even get close to the American carriers.
But you gotta give them credit. They didn't give up. The Japanese sent in a second wave, and this one was much, much bigger, 107 aircraft. This was a major commitment of their remaining air power. And this just shows you how hopeless it really was. American fighters and anti-aircraft fire meet them 60 miles out from the fleet. They shred this second wave, shooting down 97 of the 107 planes. By the end of the day, Japan had lost over 350 aircraft. The Turkey Shoot was in full swing.
But while all of this chaos was happening up in the sky, a totally different battle was being fought in the silent depths below. American submarines had found the Japanese fleet.
At about 8:16 in the morning, the submarine USS Albacore lines up a perfect shot on Japan's newest, biggest, and most advanced carrier, the Taiho, which happened to be Admiral Ozawa's own flagship. But just as it fires, its fancy fire control computer fails. They had to launch the torpedoes by eye.
And here's where it gets crazy. Only one of the 6 torpedoes actually hits. The initial damage seemed pretty minor, but that one torpedo ruptured aviation fuel tanks. Then, a damage control officer made a fatal mistake. He cranked up the ventilation system to clear the fumes, but instead it spread the highly explosive vapor all through the ship. Hours later, a single spark caused a massive internal explosion, and the brand new flagship just went down.
As if that wasn't bad enough,
Another U.S. sub, the USS Kavala, found a veteran carrier Shokaku, a survivor of the Pearl Harbor attack. 3 torpedoes hit home. The carrier just erupted in flames, and a few hours later, another catastrophic explosion of fuel vapor blew the ship apart. 2 of Japan's best carriers sunk on the same day, and not a single American plane was involved.
So, despite the unbelievable success of the first day, the Americans had a huge problem. Yeah, they decimated Japan's air power, but they still hadn't actually found the Japanese fleet itself. So day 2 became this desperate hunt for an enemy that was now trying to run away.
American search planes were flying for hours and coming up with nothing. Admiral Azawa was retreating, but he was still a threat. You can imagine the pressure on Admiral Mitcher, the commander of the U.S. carriers. Find them or let them get away and fight another day.
Finally, late in the afternoon on June 20th, a search plane gets a contact. The Japanese fleet was spotted, but, and this is a huge but, they were 275 miles away, at the absolute maximum range for an American airstrike. With daylight fading fast, Mitcher had to make a choice, launch an all-out attack, knowing his planes might not have enough fuel to make it back, or do nothing. He chose to launch. So you have over 200 American planes flying off into the setting sun. They found the Japanese fleet just before dusk, and despite facing intense anti-aircraft fire, they sank the light carrier Hio and damaged several other ships. But as they turned for home, every single pilot knew the most dangerous part of the mission was just beginning, a long flight back in total darkness, with fuel gauges hovering right on empty.
Back on the American carriers, Admiral Mitcher made another incredibly risky decision. To guide his pilots home, he gave the order to illuminate the entire fleet. Running lights, searchlights, everything was turned on, lighting up the task force like a city at sea. It was basically a massive invitation for any lurking Japanese submarines, but it was the only chance he had to save his pilots.
And this chart really shows the true cost of that gamble. Only 20 American planes were actually shot down by the Japanese during the attack, but 80 more were lost on the return trip, crashing on decks or ditching into the ocean as their fuel ran out. The journey home was 4 times deadlier than the enemy. The Japanese fleet that was left slipped away into the night, and the battle was over. While the U.S. Navy hadn't achieved its ultimate goal of sinking every single enemy ship, the damage it had inflicted was far more profound, far more permanent than just a tally of sunken hulls. And this, right here, is the crucial point. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was the death blow to Japanese naval aviation. In 2 days, the U.S. had destroyed the carrier air groups that Japan had spent a whole year painstakingly rebuilding. They lost hundreds of planes, sure, but more importantly, they lost that irreplaceable core of experienced pilots. The Japanese carriers would sail again, but they were basically hollow shells, completely unable to fight effectively. But this massive victory came with a debate that continues to this day. Admiral Spruance, the overall commander, got a lot of criticism for being too cautious. The hotshot carrier pilots argued that if he just sailed west to meet the Japanese on day 1, he could have annihilated the entire fleet. But Spruance's #1 job was to protect the invasion forces on Saipan, and he was terrified a Japanese decoy might lure him away, leaving the landings vulnerable, which, thanks to having the Z plan, he knew was part of their strategy. So, in the end, Spruance achieved this crushing victory while perfectly executing his primary mission. But the question historians still love to debate is the one you see right here. Was it a masterpiece of calculated strategy, or was it a missed opportunity for total annihilation? And that's a debate that makes this battle so endlessly fascinating.